I started out by actually looking at floods in eastern India, and I have a book on it, which is terribly boring, but nevertheless, I looked at the idea of floods over 150 years. And what I found as a historian researching in the archive is that the idea of the floods in, say, the 18th century was one of flood dependence, that people actually, like the Nile, they depended on floods. But by the mid-19th century, you get a discourse of flood vulnerability. So how did something that was a history of dependence become a history of vulnerability and become a history of flood control rather than flood utilization? So by looking at it through the course of 150 years, I was able to then argue that flood control is very recent, that flood control led to the suppression of flood utilization and flood dependence, and that given that we cannot no longer solve the problems of flood control through large dams and embankments, do we need different histories to rethink about that resource? Climate change is both a threat and an opportunity, right? But what we don't fully entirely grasp is the potentials for the opportunity, right? We've not quite understood what we mean by opportunity, right? Now I have to walk through this a little bit historically. You know, from the 18th, 19th century onwards, there was an idea about nature that through domination and through control, you could make it predictable. And because it was predictable, you could get nature to yield all kinds of benefits, right? Now we're at a point where we have lost control, right? It's not predictable. And so then how do we actually decide what are possibilities for human well-being, now that we no longer have control and we no longer have predictability? Yeah, that's the big challenge. And this is different from arguing that what we need is more predictability and more control, even though we keep losing it. Yeah. So the other way is to say, okay, let's plan, engineer, and develop institutions to live in a world where you don't necessarily have to expect that you can predict or can control. Yeah. So this is the big challenge now. And truth be told, we have built our systems, built our societies, at least in the last 200 years, around the idea of predictability and control of the natural world. Environmental history is about giving us narratives, stories, examples, and helping us to understand experience. Yeah, okay? And to say that the past is relevant as an ingredient in how we shape our futures. Yeah? Because sometimes I think some people it would be justifiable to worry that we live too much in the present, that somehow deep roots are being sliced off through the process of becoming truly modern. Yeah? And so deep roots and a sense of the past will be crucial ingredients to how we construct hopeful futures. Yeah? So the emphasis of environmental histories fundamentally is that nature is not a passive backdrop. It sometimes displays agency. And if you draw out the context carefully, you can get nature to be a partner in how you make the human possible. Yeah? So it's not exactly coexistence, it's not exactly harmony, but it's the rich interactions across social time and political time that is important. What is the problem? Why are we talking about sustainable development? Because business as usual is no longer viable, right? So it is a response to the fact that business as usual cannot go on. Right? Okay. Now, have we defined the word sustainable? No, it's not. It is a process, right, of it's trial and error. It is the question of thinking about power. It is a question about new knowledges for a world in which we no longer dominate nature in the way we used to. Yeah, we need to rethink urban design. We need to rethink a spectrum of what it is to be human, right? Now, when I say this, I think what is very fundamental in this whole issue is that there are interests in society that actually don't mind it being business as usual, right? There's a very strong constituency there. Yeah? So how do we talk to that constituency is very important. There's two kinds of politics, only two kinds in this whole world, and this, let me dare say, for 5,000 years of human history, there's two kinds of politics. One is the politics that says truth talks to power, right? If you keep telling the truth, somehow you can challenge power. That's one of the versions of politics, yeah? However, I'm not convinced about that being the only way of doing politics. The second way is the seduction of an imagination. That is, you begin to assemble a way of rethinking what it is to be human. The power of the imagination of a better life, that is also kind of politics. And this is why intellectuals are important. This is why thinking is important. This is why deliberation, democracy, debate is very important. Because we want to see what are the kinds of imaginations that are possible to strive for, yeah, to get to, yeah. So it is not enough to speak the truth. It must also be backed by the power of an imagination. Policy, we often jokingly defined it as policy is the attempt to humiliate politics through good science. Okay? That's what we generally understand policy to be. But academics and policy making must be attentive to power. That's the very crucial element, ingredient, so to speak. Yeah? If we are attentive to how power operates in society and how we recruit, create, and assemble constituencies that are far more hopeful than the ones that we have, then policy and academia work. They build those bridges. But if academia was to not be attentive to power, but would be formulaic and treat policy as formulaic exercises, then it doesn't work, right? So policy needs to be also kept attentive and sensitive to how power operates, yeah? So in that way, that's the way I understand the bridge. I'm someone who advocates for more social science research. Social science research under conditions of democracy. That is important. Yeah? But social science research not in a social vacuum, but very much part of society's efforts to deliberate and to debate and to explore ways that will help us be human. But in a tangible sense, the quest would be the one word that we should all strive for, is justice. A just world, a more democratic world, would be the best context for us to explore solutions. Now, why do I say this? I say this because, the idea of being an expert has to be a far more humble exercise. Strong men and great people are not the solution. It has to be something that will be generated from the population at large, yeah? And we have to be attentive to all kinds of possibilities, yeah? One of the great tragedies, I would say, in the last 150 years, and I say this in all seriousness, is that we have somehow eliminated a lot of differences. We've become really, truly homogeneous blocks of society, consumer-driven, debt-prone, very limited in the way we understand the world. Yeah, we have to start conversations with nomadic populations, with indigenous communities, with tribes, with clans, with subsistence agriculturalists, with slash and burn cultivators. There's a whole range of human possibilities that's been assembled in the last 5,000 years. We have to now strike a conversation. It is quite possible that the answers that we seek are not available only in this highly urbanized, very modern world that we inhabit. Yeah? So it's how to talk to difference that is very critical, in my opinion.